Hello everyone and welcome. Sit back, relax, and make a cup of tea or whatever you like to drink, and get ready for new stories from Yellow Cat. Send your own favorite stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in a new video. So, subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet, and let's get started. What behavior by your supervisor led up to your decision to quit immediately? This happened quite some time ago. During my interview for one job, I made it very obvious to the owner that I had a family obligation to travel out of state for 10 days in 10 months' time. This commitment will take place outside of the country. I had no choice but to leave. There was no room for negotiation. I did not want to accept the job until he was aware that I would take that time off regardless of the circumstances, and of course, I would not be compensated for taking that time off. If you need me to make up hours, I'm available for overtime, weekend shifts, or anything else you need. The proprietor thanked me for my honesty, checked his calendar, and reassured me that everything would be all right. During the subsequent months, I reminded the owner on multiple occasions of our agreement, and his response was consistently the same each time. No problem. When I reminded him one more time a week before the time off was arranged for me, he responded with, "No, you can't go." After that, we went back and forth for a few more minutes with me constantly reminding him of the terms of my hire and the numerous times he indicated I would be allowed to go. He would not budge an inch. I finished packing up my belongings before midday, went home, and haven't been back since. During the year 2007, I was employed by a quick-service pizza restaurant that shall not be named here. This particular store not only had a policy that stated you were not permitted to phone in any case to verify your schedule, but they were also in the annoying habit of changing schedules that had been posted. I took a week off to go see some family, and once the schedule for the following week had been issued, I made sure that there was no shift scheduled for me on the day after I was planned to be back into town. As I was driving back to town, however, I became caught in an extremely frustrating traffic jam, and I realized that there was no way I could make it back before the shop closed. I gave the store a call, described the scenario, and stated that the only reason I was calling was to verify that I would not be working the following day. The manager insulted me, stated she knew I was aware of the regulation, and suggested that I really ought to be more responsible. After that, I hung up, clenched my teeth, and made it through the traffic jam, and as soon as I arrived home, I turned off my phone. I woke up the next day and turned on my phone. The schedule had indeed been changed at the very last minute, and they had put me on to open the store. I had probably 15 missed calls, about 24 texts, and a few voicemails telling me to get my A into the store and open in time for the lunch rush. The schedule had indeed been changed at the very last minute, and they had put me on to open the store. After another 2 or 3 hours of sleep, I rolled over and went back to sleep. When I got up the second time, I treated myself to a leisurely cup of coffee, took a lengthy shower, and eventually handed in my uniform sometime in the afternoon. They made several attempts to get me to admit guilt by having me sign a write-up for my missing shift. I informed them that I would have gotten there on time if they had simply informed me over the phone that I had to work on that particular day. I am certain that I was able to secure a new position later that day. About 15 years ago, I was recruited as a prep cook at a neighborhood bar and brewery. I was very eager to enter the culinary industry since I love to cook and wanted to create a career out of it. Everything was going well since I was fantastic at my work, picked things up quickly, and learned how the chef liked things. A week from now, the dishwasher will be on vacation. Chef says I must cover for him. No problem. I'll cover for the dishwasher for a week. First few shifts go without a hitch. Then Friday night arrives. We get thoroughly pummeled. I'm talking about a packed house and non-stop waiting for about 2 hours. I'm rushing around to the server stations and grabbing the bus tubs to bring back to the dish pit as rapidly as the small dishwasher can wash dishes. There were 5 server stations. There wasn't a filthy dish in the house that wasn't in the pit because I had just finished carrying the bus tubs there. The sink was obviously full. "What the heck are you doing?" Chef yells as he passes by. "How challenging is dishwashing? I could do better if each of my arms were broken." I responded, "Okay, a-hole, do it then." I removed my apron and left. He had to single-handedly clean up that mess, and I don't regret it one bit. That day, I realized that despite my love of cooking, I don't necessarily want to work in a kitchen. I started working for the company where I had worked as a summer intern for 4 years while in college. Since no one else had any experience with either of these jobs and the electrician and PLC programmer expected to retire in a few years, I was supposed to learn from them. The boss persuaded him to stay an extra month so I could have time to learn before he decided to retire 1 month after I arrived. In those 2 months, I learned nothing from him because he was a lousy teacher. After around 4 months, I had mastered the design, construction, and installation of electrical control panels, the creation of electrical systems for our projects, and the initial programming of 4 distinct PLC kinds. Because of his terrible organization skills, I was unable to locate many of the prior programmers' earlier works. I was looking for one so I could go work on it in the field one day. I couldn't locate it. My manager promised to look, but he couldn't find it. I had to have faith that I could get this thing out of the present PLC because it is not where it's supposed to be. My employer was not amused. In front of all my employees and others on the job site, he gave me a new a-hole for not properly storing stuff. Since I didn't write the code and hadn't seen it, it wasn't my fault. Thus, I wouldn't give in. He wouldn't understand that it wasn't my fault. Therefore, we were back and forth for approximately 20 minutes with just the two of us. Finally, I walked back to the office after yelling, "F you, a-hole, I won't work for you." A 2-hour stroll. On the way back, he called me several times, but I didn't pick up. When I walked into the office, he was there waiting. He apologized for going too far. I told him I have nothing to apologize for because all I did was defend myself from false allegations and meant every word I said. I never stopped to personal attacks. I got in my truck and never looked back after leaving. This was 10 years ago, and I had close friends there who said they still don't have somebody to work on PLCs. It's much better for me because I now earn 6 figures because of my electrical and PLC expertise. I live there with a $20 hourly wage. Because he's seeking to hire a PLC person at $18 an hour, he spoiled a good thing for himself. Hired the old boss's daughter to be my manager. I was the manager for 4 months. Every task he gave her ended up back on my desk her first day, and she threatened me, so I quit. He begged me to come back for months, but I wasn't interested in having 4 people who were above me on a 5-person team. What's the point of being hired as the number 2 person only to find out that the old boss is keeping his job and both his children are getting promoted? What is your HOA horror story, Americans? In an effort to vote on converting the huge field and walking route that everyone used for enjoyment into an RV park, the HOA attempted to convene a secret community meeting. It was considered secret since they essentially kept it a secret from everyone and posted the necessary notification in an obscure location. Most of the board members owned RVs, as you can probably expect. Fortunately, a few nearby residents noticed and began knocking on doors. When a mob arrived, the plan was flatly rejected. Stupid dirtbags. I had to confront the horrible HOA that used to prowl our prior area. I had to repeatedly remind the HOA that they weren't my vehicles and that I had no control over what other people did when I wasn't at home because they had been parked on my lawn while I was away on business. Then, even though it was legally not even my property, they kept sending me fines for unkempt property because my neighbor's lawn staff wouldn't mow the incline between our houses. I was fined once more for letting in too many people in the community pool. For access to the pool area, RFID cards were required, but I never received one because I didn't want to touch that bandaged swamp. I was constantly calling and arguing with these idiots. I finally had enough with the inadequate drainage one summer. These neighborhoods are often carved out without much consideration for good drainage, like anthill, cookie-cutter, sardine can garbage. The developer ignores the issue and leaves the homeowners to handle it. Every time it rained, my backyard would turn to muck, and the water would pool up against our foundation. I was sick of it. In order to prevent the water from collecting, I constructed a short retaining wall on one side, sloped the side that faced my house, and extended the patio bricks. It was a weekend effort that just required some basic rented tools and the assistance of 2 friends. No permit was required, and I made sure it complied with all 10 billion HOA requirements. The result was stunning, and the drainage was greatly improved, resulting in better grass growth in both our yard and the neighbor's yard. A few weeks later, I caught sight of someone pacing my backyard and peering in my windows. It was the irate HOA narc, a retired woman who would patrol the neighborhood and look at everyone's property before sending Berkshire Hathaway complaints. I followed her outdoors and inquired about her activity.
"I may be here. I'm with the HOA, she remarked.
"No, lady, stop invading and leave my property." She began listing all the infractions. "Look, you can either get off my property or I'll remove you from it," I said when I had had enough. She flashed me a vile, scrunched-up grin and threatened to call the cops. "Oh, I'd hate for you to do that without a cause. Give me a moment," I said. I entered the house, unlocked the nearby window, and loaded the empty weapon. She departed quickly. I called BH and inquired about their policy regarding people entering my property without permission or a valid excuse. "Absolutely not. We'll bring it up with the narc," they responded. "She shouldn't be acting in that way." A few weeks later, I noticed her strolling past the yard of my neighbor. He quickly phoned the police because he was not as considerate as I was. A restraining order was granted for trespassing on private property, and the shrieking woman was led away in handcuffs. The HOA board no longer includes her and is said to be planning to leave the area soon. Years ago, I filed a harassment lawsuit against my HOA. 3 board members bullied us about a variety of things, including the curtains in our backyard and the fact that our car was 2 inches too far from the driveway to park on the sidewalk. The 3 board members were fired, and they are no longer permitted to hold office in the state of Florida. Since moving, we are no longer residents of an HOA and never will be. I have no misgivings about spending the $5,000 to sue them. I'm Canadian, but my mother has some terrifying HOA tales. Story 1. Children would climb all over the big boulders that were on either side of the driveway entrance to the survey as they waited for the bus in the mornings. Each homeowner in the HOA had to pay a couple of $1,000s for the settlement since the HOA's head harassed the children and the HOA was sued as a result. After a lady was fired from the executive, she quickly left. Story 2 involves her next-door neighbor. In between them, their son suffered a mental breakdown and broke the neighbor's window. For my mother, that was the final straw, and she sold the house and left. I'll never sign up for an HOA. The board president was stealing from us. He was joined by another board member. I exposed him to the community once I had a pretty decent notion of what was going on based on his attempts to convince me to join his plot. Having been expelled from a few board sessions, more people have come to understand why he didn't want me there exposing his BS. We had to go door to door every evening for several weeks to collect enough signatures to get our board taken down. At any upcoming meetings, none of them would appear in person to defend themselves. There was no denying that they were embezzlement criminals. I assumed the presidency of the board and began righting the ship. Additionally, wed a neighbor who assisted in gathering signatures. Also wound up getting married to one of the neighbors who had been part of the signature collection. She's the best thing that ever happened to me, so the fact that this piece of ass loser Katrina transplant tried to steal from us made me a happy man in a way. My house is not part of the HOA, but recently the board of the neighboring HOA changed. The chairman was a woman who is a stereotype of the terrible head of the HOA. On the first day of her appointment, she knocked on my door. The dialogue went as follows. For convenience, let's call the chairman Karen. Me. How can I help you, ma'am? Karen. I'm the new head of the HOA, and I'm here to inform you that your house and your lot are not up to code. Me. Yeah, I know. Karen. I demand that you change the situation as soon as possible, or you will be given a huge fine for noncompliance. Me. No. With the most even-keeled face. Karen just went, What do you mean, no? You have to follow the rules. Your house looks terrible. Me. First of all, don't shout, I can hear you just fine. Second, my house looks fine. And third, your rules don't apply to me. My house is not part of the HOA. So get off the property and never come back, or I'll call the police. Karen was ready to choke on her indigestion.
How dare you? If you are not part of the HOA, you must join immediately and make your house look good immediately!
Me. Get the F out of here, and slammed the door in her face. From the window, I could see the crazy woman take a crowbar I forgot to hide in the garage from my porch, walk up to my fence, and start breaking it down. I called the police right away. She was caught red-handed because she didn't even stop when she heard the sound of a police car honking. She was handcuffed, and I was very happy to file a report against her for trespassing and destruction of property. She had to pay me a pretty hefty settlement. She also covered the entire cost of repairing the fence. And the cherry on top, it was her first and last day as head of the HOA. Thank you for subscribing, the likes, and the comments. We're very happy to see you all in the comments too. Thanks for your support.